just pass it to me.
He's been in California like the last 10 years.
You just had to let me sit here.
He just was on his bike.
Are you serious about the hammer and sickle here?
There's a couple communists here in our camp that were mostly anarchists.
Okay, so communists or anarchists? Or
I'm an anarchist. Most of the people here are anarchists as well. There's a couple communists we're trying to win over to our side, though.
Okay.
And I still think communism is a good idea, but it's never been tried. The Soviet Union was never communist. China is not communist. Vietnam, Laos, Cuba. Communism's never been given a fair chance. Everyone has used the name Communist Party when they take power. They just turn it into an authoritarian dictatorship.
But don't you think that it's going to happen every time when you try? I mean, we've tried so many times, and in every occasion we failed.
I don't necessarily think it does need tried, but I think if it did, it would need to be tried with American characteristics.
But why? What's wrong with capitalism then? I mean, after all, capitalism gave.
Most of the world hungry and
how so? I mean, name me a single capitalist country where people, a developed capitalist country where people go hungry versus
the United States.
versus
Go hungry every day here.
Well, but let's put it in perspective. I mean, I don't know anyone who would literally go hungry. For example, in the USSR, between 1932 and 1933, about 10 million people died because of starvation.
But that you can't attribute that to communism. That was Joseph Stalin being a scumbag.
Well, but aren't all of them? I mean, when you think of it, everyone who claims to be a communist ends up being what you term to be a scumbag.
Yeah, it's true. But I don't think communism has been given a fair chance. People use the name, but they don't.
But everybody. But that's my point. Everybody tries it. I mean, isn't this a simple hammer and sickle kind of?
The hammer and sickle was a symbol of the workers' rights movement in Europe long before the Bolsheviks. So.
Tell him, Brendan.
But we all know how it all ended up again in Cuba, in Soviet Russia, North Korea.
All right, Cuba's an
China.
interesting one because I don't like how the government in Cuba is so oppressive and silences all dissent. However, Cuba has the higher standard of living of any country in the Caribbean.
You really think so?
Yes, they do.
Education
You think?
and medical.
Free guaranteed housing, everyone is guaranteed work.
You think so?
That I've heard.
They did it in Cuba, but let's say if you get an education, what are you going to do with it? You can't get a decent job. Even if you're educated. If you're a doctor, for example, you're paid half of a salary of a blue-collar worker. You know that, right?
Well, I mean, why should a doctor be paid exorbitantly more than a blue-collar worker to begin with?
How about being just more than a blue-collar worker? Then let's say a street sweeper. Do you think the doctor should be paid more than, let's say, I don't know, a mechanic, for example, or a street sweeper?
In a system where education is free and that doctor didn't have to pay his own, capital in order to get that job, not necessarily. As somebody who has a graduate degree, I don't necessarily think I should be making exorbitantly more than somebody who didn't have that
let's for
opportunity.
argument's sake remove the word exorbitant. Just the doctor. Don't you think that to be a doctor, you invest in your education, and you
not if your education is paid for by the government.
Hold on. Let me continue my thought. As a patient, when you see a doctor, you want the doctor to be a good doctor. I mean, after all, your life is in the doctor's hands, right? Of course. So, for someone like a doctor to be motivated to be a good doctor, meaning to save your life or to help you when you have an ailment, wouldn't you want that to be a good doctor? So what's his motivation then to be a good doctor when, in the end, someone who didn't go to school and sweeps the streets gets the same salary as a doctor, especially a good doctor?
I definitely appreciate this argument, but I've never met somebody who went into medicine because they wanted to make money. They wanted to save people's lives. I became a lawyer because I wanted to help people who couldn't afford to participate in the legal system.
And you're paid more than a blue-collar worker.
Before that, I was a teacher, and I didn't become a teacher because of the salary. I became a teacher because I wanted to help children learn. So I think that when people are doing jobs that they really enjoy, they don't need a financial incentive to do those jobs well. They do it because they want to.
So you don't think that, let's say, American doctors are better than Cuban doctors, right?
I'm sure there is a Cuban doctor that's better than an American doctor.
One Cuban doctor, perhaps. Yes.
I mean, we could take a study and see how satisfied patients are in Cuba versus America.
Well, let's say one of the best parameters, I guess, when it comes to gauging the health of a system is the lifespan of a person. For instance, if you take all the capitalist countries, the lifespan is much longer than any of that of the people that live in, let's say not capitalist countries, call them socialist dictatorships or whatever.
In certain socioeconomic brackets. So, for example, in Mississippi has one of the highest mortality rates.
I'm talking about the country on the average. Let's say the United States of America, Japan, Liechtenstein, for instance, versus Russia. Do you know the life expectancy in Russia of a man?
I can't say.
Okay, do you know life expectancy of a man in the United States?
75 is it now?
Yeah, roughly 75, 77, something within that range. Do you know what, by comparison, is the life expectancy of someone who lives in Russia these days?
I don't know.
Take a guess.
65, 50.
How about if I say between 57 and 60?
That's a big difference, but
it's
again,
a humongous difference. And how can you attribute this low life expectancy? What are they going to attribute it to?
I wouldn't attribute it to the undermotivation of doctors, but rather a lack of resources that the USSR has in comparison with America.
Wouldn't you agree that to extend somebody's life, you really have to have the medication that basically extends your life, A, and B, when it comes to the diagnostic equipment?
We do. I mean, in this country, we have inflated pharmaceutical prices, and we are the only country that doesn't, to my knowledge, first world country, that doesn't regulate prescription prices. So in other countries, in England, for example, you can't charge whatever you want for a prescription. The government sets a price for it. So, I mean, we spend so much more on medical care in this country. I mean, maybe it has some kind of impact over the long term, but
have you ever used a medicine developed, researched and developed in Cuba or in Russia or in North Korea, for example?
I know that the pharmaceutical companies argue they need that money for development, but over the last 10 years, they've spent more money developing things like erectile dysfunction drugs than they have malaria medication.
But the point is, the system that we have over here, since the pharmaceutical company invests billions and billions of dollars in the research, isn't it the money well spent to extend the life and the quality of life of people? Shouldn't they make profit so that they can reinvest it and develop a better diagnostic equipment, better medication? Don't you think so?
But they're not putting that money back into diagnostic equipment and medication for curable diseases. They're putting that money into development for drugs that are profitable, like again, your allergy medication or erectile dysfunction drugs.
Well, let me, for full disclosure, I was actually born and raised in Russia, in USSR.
Говорите по-русски?
Я говорю по-русски. So, in US, have you ever been to Russia?
I haven't. No.
So, but since you know a couple of phrases, at least in Russian, probably you're familiar with the system before and after USSR, and especially when there was a system that some called socialist, some called whatever, but they're all united by the same term, totalitarian regimes. So, me as the person who lived in the USSR for the first 29 years of my life, I'm still, having been here for 23 years by now, I'm amazed when I go to a pharmacy and whatever medication I need is going to be available in 15 minutes. In the Soviet Union, there isn't such a thing. You go to a pharmacy and you get the medication right away. Or you go to a doctor and the doctor is going to see you. But most importantly, to actually help you.
I would not in any way defend the USSR system, especially.
But that's what people are defending with the hammer and sickle. Whenever I see a hammer and sickle, I mean, where are they going to take us to? To the same system, failed system that being tried and failed, resulting in hundreds of millions of people
As
killed.
a communist was a part of this camp? No.
As a what?
As a communist was part of this camp? No.
So where would you go then? What's
a new kind of system.
love to argue.
I mean, it's something that I think needs to be collectively decided upon. I have my own ideas about how business should be structured, blah, blah,
but what do
I
you
will
mean?
certainly say that if by communism you mean pretty much everything that happened in the 20th century, I am not a communist.
But what are the other? There are no other forms.
This is the mindset, and I love it, and I agree with you 100% of kind of modern. I think the term communism is something that makes people incredibly uncomfortable because of the history.
Okay, how about if we use the word socialism? They all try using, fancy words. It's like as if we call our system paradise, will it become a paradise?
Socialist because that's what they called themselves.
Then who were they?
They're a bunch of goons calling themselves communists and ruining the name.
Well, but that's true. Like I said, with every single society that tried another system that rejected
even
the
here, we call
capital.
ourselves a capitalist society, but when you have a government that bails out the wealthiest free institutions, that's no longer really capitalism because capitalism should let failing businesses fail.
Okay, then how? I agree with that. But then, what's the definition of socialism and capitalism? I mean, words are supposed to have meaning. Then, what's the definition?
Capitalism's the simplest way to put it is an unrestrained free market, and socialism is a market that's directed and run by the state.
Okay, then how about a little bit different definition, which to my mind fundamentally makes one different from the other when you look at the private property rights. That's the fundamental difference between the two, wouldn't you agree?
Capitalism, the means of production are controlled in private hands, and socialism, they're controlled by the state.
Right, and that's why the latter one fails and the first one succeeds.
Socialism, where it's been attempted, has mostly failed because it was run by piss-poor bureaucrats. Capitalism here in America is failing right now. Why else would these banks
Of course it's not. It's failing. You know why it's failing? Because of too much infusion of socialism. The less socialism we have, the more successful this country will be.
Anywhere in this country.
Of course, there's plenty of social programs. Wherever you look, like welfare. Isn't it a socialist program, for instance?
It is, but that doesn't interfere with the free market, though.
Well, yes, it does.
I think it's
Government,
the duty of any government to take care of its people when they're in need.
government regulations. Wherever you go, the government control your life from birth to end. Whatever you're trying to do, the government is in control.
I despise that. That's why I'm an
Well,
anarchist.
then,
However, it's not just the government. The capitalism itself,
yes.
banking institutions, large corporations that control the manufacture of everything we buy, they interfere with our lives as much as the government does.
And you're laughing because
I don't know. Different signals and different voices.
signals. Okay, from space, I guess. Okay, well, anyway.
It's nice to meet you. That's a good
Yeah,
conversation.
pleasure.
My name's Erin, by the
I'm
way.
Vladimir.
Vladimir,
Pleasure.
I'll see you around.
See
Have
ya.
a good day.
Bye-bye.